Find. Pentagon correspondent David Martin reports.
During the Vietnam War, Ross Perot helped the Nixon administration dramatize the plight of POWs, financing a high-profile publicity campaign, trying, among other things, to deliver them Christmas presents. It was a ray of hope for men who feared their country had abandoned them.
He had a profound effect on my whole group of prisoners. It became a slogan, way to go, Ross Perot.
Campaign is concerned. He never talked to me about that, but certainly there was some discussion, apparently, with others at lower levels. Nothing, however, was done on it. However, I should make it clear, I appreciated the fact that at a time that many people in the American establishment were not supporting our efforts in Vietnam, were not supporting the POW. Ross Perot was doing so.
Did you get the impression, Mr. President, that he was trying to obtain favors from your administration?
That is possible. I have yet to see a businessman who didn't try to obtain favors from the administration. So he was doing exactly what his other colleagues were doing in the business community. On the other hand, I never saw him do anything that I thought was improper. He never made any suggestions or offers that were out of line, that were illegal, or, in my view, unethical.
What advice would you give George Bush this morning, since you continue to support him and endorse him?
Well, George Bush is getting so much advice, I hate to add to it, but I would simply suggest this. He should avoid that advice that tells him to attack Perot. What George Bush has got to get across to the American people is not why he is against Perot and what's wrong with Perot. He has to get across what's right with him. I would like to see George Bush run a positive campaign where he wants to lead the country abroad and where he wants to lead the country at home.
Do you think he will run a pro-Bush campaign, or do you think he's going to come out swinging at some point?
Well, some of his advisors, of course, are urging him to take on Perot. I think that would be a mistake. It would simply build up Perot more than he is. I believe that a positive campaign is the kind George Bush personally would like to run. He is not one who is basically a negative kind of person. He likes to be positive. And I certainly hope that he will let his better instincts prevail over some of the amateurs who are trying to advise him to take on Perot. That short term maybe looks good, long term it's disastrous.
What about Governor Clinton's chances? Do you think his candidacy will be resuscitated?
Well, first I would say that Governor Clinton at the present time is at a low level. It's a two-man race, and it may remain a two-man race. However, I would sense that he's probably bottomed out. And if he can make a very effective speech when he will have the biggest audience he's ever had at the Democratic Convention, he could start to climb back up. But before he makes that speech, he should get somebody to time him so that he doesn't do what he did when he addressed the convention before and talked so long that he lost his audience.
I was there and I remember it well. November is still 5 months away. As you know, a lot can happen in 5 months. Do you care to venture a guess about who will be president in November?
Well, if I were betting, I would bet, of course, on George Bush. That's what my heart tells me, and that's what my head tries to tell me. But this is a very unpredictable year. As I look at the primaries, as I see people go down that I thought were cinches to win, I think that we would make a great mistake to assume this is going to be like any other year and that a third-party candidate like John Anderson faded away. George Wallace came down to 12% after he had been 20 to 25%. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think what's going to happen is that Perot is going to surprise people by being a major candidate right to the end. And at the present time, unless Clinton is able to revive his campaign at his convention, it's going to be a two-man race. And in the end, George Bush should win. I want him to win, but it's going to be very close.
When we come back, President Nixon talks about his trip to Russia and the situation there. But first, this is Today on NBC.
Stabbed to death.
So stabbed to death, and the Japanese police, after a year of investigation, have recently announced that they believe that was done by Islamic terrorists coming in from outside Japan. So the issue is still very, very much alive. And, you know, I'm very anxious that it should be resolved while I'm still very much alive.
You write of many things in this collection, including in some of the essays, your isolation. But I was surprised, I guess, that I didn't see much emotion or passion in those writings. You seem to look at it still rather coldly, analytically, I guess is the word I should use.
I don't know, it's difficult, isn't it? Because one's trying to argue out a very difficult case. I mean, I think one of the things that's been hardest for me is that in some ways everybody, including in the West, has allowed the people who've been attacking me and my work to set the terms of the debate. And so if one wants to say, hang on a minute, we're not actually talking about those things, we're talking about terrorism and violence and censorship and so forth, and then in a way one does have to talk about ideas. It's important. This is an issue about, it's not just an issue about a man's life or about several people's lives. It's an issue about the most important ideas of a free society. And of course, one wants to argue that as, it's not coldly, but one wants to argue them as ideas and not to use the kind of overheated emotional language that's been used against me.
Do you feel your writing has changed much while you've been in captivity?
My writing changes all the time. I think certainly my perspective has changed. I mean, I've learned a great deal more about myself, about the world in the last... So, I mean, I think it's inevitable that it would affect it in some way. I mean, I think certainly...
He is in Moscow this week at the head of an American delegation seeking to promote humanitarian aid and private investment in Russia. It is his 8th visit to that country, and earlier this morning, in his only interview while in Moscow, I asked him about the changes he has found there.
Well, first, of course, there are new leaders here. The ones I met before, some are dead and some are in prison. The new Yeltsin team is very impressive, very young, very dedicated, and I think very competent with a huge task. As far as the people are concerned, I visited a market, and what impressed me was that while prices were too high, that's the bad news, the products were there. There was plenty to sell. I think over a period of time, they're going to succeed, but it's going to be a very hard achievement. But I think President Yeltsin's leadership will make it succeed.
I understand you were also struck by the attitudes of some of the people you met in that market.
Yes, I find in going to a market after you've been treated very well by the diplomats and the Foreign Service and the rest, the Russian Foreign Service, going to the markets is the way to find out what people really think. And as I went through this market, just as I had a year ago, I could see that while they were going through very difficult times, that their spirit was good. Before they were depressed, they had no hope. And now, despite the fact that they have high prices, despite the fact that they may have unemployment, they have confidence in their leadership. They want democracy. They want free markets. They believe that it's going to work.
We have been hearing reports, however, that the Communist Party, rather, is not dead, and that it poses a potential threat to democracy in the former Soviet Union. Have you seen or heard any hard evidence of that?
Oh, there's no question that there are a lot of communists still in positions. On the other hand, at the present time, that isn't a very popular role to be in. And many who were communists now are supporting Yeltsin in the free market because he is in power. I think that we have to realize that the choice now is not between Yeltsin and somebody better, but Yeltsin and somebody worse. I do not believe, however, that Gorbachev will be the one they will turn to. I found no one that I have met who believes that he has a future in the former Soviet Union, or that means in Russia.
What is your reading of the public feud going on between Mr. Yeltsin and Mr. Gorbachev?
Katie, the way I analyze that is this. Gorbachev made Yeltsin possible with his reforms. On the other hand, Gorbachev's place in history is now in the hands of Yeltsin. If Yeltsin succeeds, Gorbachev's place in history is secure. If Yeltsin fails, Gorbachev fails with him. Therefore, these two should work together. Each holds the other's fate in his hands.
Back in March, Mr. President, you charged that the United States was making a, quote, pathetically inadequate effort to aid President Yeltsin. Now the Bush administration's multi-billion-dollar aid package is stalled in Congress. It's unclear whether it will pass at all. If it does not pass, how serious a threat will that pose to the Russian people?
Well, first, I believe that aid package will pass after the Congress and the American people see Boris Yeltsin. He's going to have a dramatic effect on the attitudes of people toward Russia, toward him, and toward aid. Second, if it does not pass, however, that will be disastrous for the Russian people. It's also going to be disastrous for us, because that means that freedom will fail, and that means that we will have a reversion to something much worse. It means the peace dividend will be lost. It means also we will have to rearm rather than cutting back on arms. If it succeeds, on the other hand, it means more jobs for thousands of Americans with the trade we're going to have with the new free democratic Russia.
Will you be briefing President Bush on your meetings with Boris Yeltsin and other Russian leaders before Boris Yeltsin comes to Washington in a few weeks?
Yes, I will be passing on my observations to the White House.
What will those observations be? What will you tell President Bush?
Well, one, I couldn't say specifically, of course, because that is for his ears only. But two, it's my appraisal of Yeltsin as a political figure. He is going to survive. His opponents have no good leaders, and they have no program whatever. He is the one we must put our chips on. We must do everything we can to see that he does survive. A second point that I think our audience would like to know is President Yeltsin made it clear that he's not going to come to Washington with his hands out, looking for a handout. He's going to come to Washington and ask the American people and President Bush to join him and the Russian people to join hands in building a new era of good relations between our two peoples and an era of peace and prosperity for ourselves, for the Russian people, and for people generally in the world. And I think that's going to have a dramatic impact on attitudes toward Russia and Russian aid.
I know one of the main objectives of your trip is to encourage private enterprise in the former Soviet Union. But right now that seems to be held up frequently by bureaucratic red tape. Do you think some of that red tape will be cut as a result of your visit?
You are exactly right that red tape is holding it up. President Bush has his problems with the Congress, as we know, but believe me, President Yeltsin has his problems with the Congress because it was elected before he came to power, and many of them in that Congress do not support him. However, he assured me that he was going to pass decrees, if necessary, go over the heads of the Congress, decrees that would put the free market reforms in place.
Finally, Mr. President, it's been almost 2 decades since you have left office. When you resigned in 1974, many people thought that would be the end of Richard Milhous Nixon. But today, you are considered by many to be America's wise elder statesman. Are you pleased with this current role?
What I am trying to do is not to rebuild my place in history. That can't be done. What I am trying to do is to provide guidance and leadership in areas where I have some expertise. That's why I spoke out on aid to Russia at an early time, before others were doing so. I felt that if I didn't do it in this political year, others would not. And let me point out, Katie, that not only does President Bush support aid to Russia, but this is a place where there is a bipartisan effort. Governor Clinton supports it, and Ross Perot does. And that is to their credit, because believe me, foreign aid to anybody, to Russia, to Israel, in an election year when a country is just coming out of recession, is poison. It's courageous for all of these men to support it, and I hope the Congress will follow them and approve it after President Yeltsin has his state visit.
Former President Richard Nixon. It is now almost 22 minutes past the hour. We'll be back right after this.
I said, well, those are the steps on the back of the Zartman house.
That a little Charlie Gibson
I know I walked down those steps at graduation a lot of years ago when I graduated from high school.
Your old alma mater.
It's my old alma mater, and they're graduating, I think, today, and I wish all those graduates well.
You bet. It is Friday. It is June 5th. I'm Joan Lunden.
And I'm Charles Gibson, and we got some amazing-looking automobiles.
Yes, you remember the old muscle cars, those big, bruising, high-powered roadsters that you all saw in those Elvis movies? Well, stay tuned for a brand-new, fire-breathing hunk of burning power. It is called the Viper. What else? And should the Corvette be worried? Well, we'll let you decide.
We have a Viper and a Vet, and we'll give you a comparison.
And some star filters there on that car,
That's right.
I think.
Also this morning, find out why comedian Jim Morris is having a field day these days. We'll give you a hint. Bush, Clinton, Perot, and company. Indeed, we have all three of the presidential candidates here, all wrapped into one person, Jim Morris. And Hollywood comes to Concord, Massachusetts with a new movie starring Goldie Hawn and Steve Martin. And Chantal will have that story in a few moments, but we go first to Mike Schneider with the news. Mike?
Thank you, Charlie. Good morning, everybody. President Bush seems to have a plan to deal with the other presidential candidates. Ignored them, at least for now. At last night's White House news conference, Mr. Bush pretty much brushed aside questions about Ross Perot and Bill Clinton, and he zeroed in on his topic of the day, the federal deficit and the balanced budget amendment.
44 states have their own constitutional balanced budget requirements, and the federal government must now do the same. The moment is at hand. In the coming days, we will face an extraordinary choice. We can choose either to accept the status quo, piling debt upon debt, or we can strike a bold new course, restoring fiscal sanity to the federal government.
The president's two main rivals weren't exactly hiding out yesterday. Bill Clinton went on television a little after the president spoke. Clinton said that the president's had 4 years to balance the budget, and that the president finally calling for that now is what Clinton said, something between amusing and amazing. That is a quote. And the undeclared presidential candidate, Ross Perot, rallied his supporters in Las Vegas yesterday. They presented Nevada state officials with 50,000 signatures to put Perot on the ballot in that state. That's 5 times more than the number legally necessary. One of the two unions still negotiating with AT&T says it will not strike this weekend, but the Communication Workers of America may throw up something that's called an electronic picket line. The union says it may urge union members and businesses to switch away from AT&T to other long-distance companies. AT&T insists that's hard to understand since its competitors are mostly non-union companies. Consumer confidence is on the way up just a little bit. This week's ABC News Money magazine poll shows 89% of those surveyed still rate the economy negatively. That's only one-third. That's only the third time, rather. It's gone below 90% this year. 51% said their personal finances are in bad shape. That is down 2 points from last week. And 3/4 still don't think the time is right for buying right now. Retailers are also blaming something right now, the weather, for their weak sales. Here's ABC's Stephen Ogg.
Good morning. Major American retailers say more than anything else, it was unseasonably cool and wet weather that held down sales last month. But despite the weather, some big chains still managed to do well, though sales were not as good as they were last May, when hot weather brought out consumers who bought lots of summer products. For many retailers, May of last year was about the best month of an otherwise dismal year. Among the biggest chains, Walmart says sales rose 12% last month from the same month a year ago. Kmart was up 1.8%, Sears Roebuck up a fraction. And speaking of sales, by now you know that sales of American cars are doing much better. One reason? Back in March, the Torrington Company, one of the nation's biggest automobile parts makers, offered its 9,000 workers $1,000 each towards the purchase of a new American car. The result? More than 1,200 workers bought, and Torrington paid out more than $1.2 million. On Wall Street, markets reopened following a small drop yesterday. The Dow fell about 7 points. Finally, Taco Bell has been selling Mexican food since it was founded 30 years ago, but it's never sold Mexican food in Mexico. Now that's going to change. The company that owns it, PepsiCo, says it opened its first Taco Bell outlet in Mexico yesterday in Mexico City. It plans 2 more there and a 4th in Tijuana. Future expansion may depend on whether Mexicans think Taco Bell is a ringing success. That's the economy this morning.
Cool today, hot tamale? Spencer will answer that question.
Looks like humor is not your forte. Let's take a look at what's going on the weather maps. It's going to be a sunny Friday in the western half of the nation. In the plains, there will be some sunshine, but also some storms from time to time, thunderstorms from the central plains down into Texas. So once again, looks like Texas does run the risk of getting some rainfall. Through the Mississippi Valley, sunny skies today. In the east, a messy
weather day shaping up as heavy rainfall pushes into the mid-Atlantic and northeastern states.
A little too high for me. Well, East Coast girls are hip. I really dig those styles they wear. And the Southern girls with the way they talk, they knock me up when I'm down there. Everybody, the Midwest farmers' daughters really make you feel alright. And the Northern girls with the way they kiss, they keep their boyfriends warm at night. Let's bring it down as we wish they could all be California girls. I've got to do the weather here. I feel like doing a dedication. Peter, can you bring the music down a little bit? I love you all out there. Take a look at the weather, all you California girls and Midwestern girls. In the Northeast, cool rainy days expected today. Onshore breezes will keep temperatures in the 50s and 60s. Most places should pick up at least an inch of rain. Tennessee Valley and the Deep South, sunny skies. In California today, a high of 75 in Los Angeles, and the band is playing in the background. That's a quick look at the national forecast. Let's take a look at your weather.
Temperatures across Iowa today will be very warm in the 80s. Now, we will see clear skies this morning, but clouds will be on the increase, especially from the west. We will see a high today in Des Moines of about 80 degrees.
I got to thank you, Peter. I don't think I'll ever work in the business again. Peter Dell, thank you so much. Now, last night they had a big celebration here. One thing about Capitol Records, when you think about music, you have to think about Capitol Records. It's a company that started small and grew to be a very big company, and a company that was very influential in the music business in their 50 years. Last night they threw themselves a big birthday bash.
It was a night of magic, music, and memories.
Well, I just feel sentimental. They were the greatest label we were ever on. Better than Warner Brothers and better than CBS.
While it's happening, I would assume like someone like Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra and a lot of the big artists, while they were doing what they were doing, they didn't realize the magnitude of it, because time has a way of magnifying one's accomplishments, I guess. So I'm really in awe of it all.
When Johnny Mercer talked to me and said, would you join us at Capitol Records? And I said, I'd love to. So he said, you'll be one of the first we signed. And I was.
But he's got high hopes. He's got high hopes.
Capitol Records' legacy is a legacy of giants. Sinatra, the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and one man who was on a lot of people's minds tonight, the late, great Nat King Cole.
Somewhere there's music, how faint the tune.
Glenn Wallace used to say Nat built this building. Glenn Wallace, as you know, was one of the founders of Capitol Records. His widow is here tonight. And we used to always talk about that after Nat died. He said, this is the house that Nat built. He would say it just like that to me.
I used to just love Nat. You know, I used to be such a fan. I used to follow him all around, you know. And it's a big thrill to see how well Natalie's doing, isn't it? Huh?
I think of first Mr. Nat King Cole, who was one of my first inspirations. I had the opportunity of recording a song in the same studio that Nat actually recorded in at Capitol Records. So I think of the nostalgia. I think of all of the great music that's come out of here, and I'm really excited to be a part of such a great company.
Capitol Records was the first major label to open its doors here in Los Angeles, a fact the city is still proud of.
It just brings back many warm memories, not only of the great talent, but the fact that this great record company was innovative, was visionary, was the first major record company to establish its international headquarters in Los Angeles.
We got all the artists. The night provided a rare opportunity. 50 years of Capitol recording artists, young and old, gathering for a class photo. Some artists were already looking ahead to the next 50 years.
I hope I'm here for the next 50th.
We'll see you then.
Huh? How about that, folks?
Big party last night. Mayor Bradley was just on the phone, said I can stay in Los Angeles for the weekend if I promise not to sing one more note. Harry?
Although your mom just called, she wants to know how to get a copy of the California Girls.
My dad's selling it in the lobby. I know he is already.
All right, thanks, Mark. 19 minutes until the hour. Coming up next, Dr. Bob Arnott goes to school with Big pal.
Hi, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger from CBS This Morning. You're going to watch a continuation of the Bob Arnott Show. No matter what they tell you, it's the Bob Arnott Show. So watch it. Don't switch channels now on me.
Well, he did, but he learned from that. He didn't seem too distressed. You'll notice he didn't volunteer that information when he was being interviewed by the TV reporter. And by the way, it's so true to life, because at the beginning of the day, the little gal who was the TV reporter was very deferential to the cameraman. By the end of the day, she was saying, "Hey, dude, over here," and giving him looks and jabbing him in the rib.
Dear.
The kids really do learn an awful lot about how the real world works. It's a terrific program.
Great experience for them. Maybe we all should have done that.
Yeah, there should be more like it.
Thanks, Mike. Coming up later in this half hour, Harrison Ford is a CIA agent marked for death by Irish terrorists in the new movie Patriot Games.
You can do a very rapid kind of fire drill with practice putting it in and out, you know.
All right, now, over to the Corvette.
Yeah.
This, you say, is basically a street car in which you can race.
And which you can race. But it's not advisable unless you're going to be on the track, but you can get into as much trouble in this car as you can get into in that one. This is 400 horsepower. This is about 300 horsepower. You know, both use manual transmission, stick shift, what have you. But the thing about the Corvette is that it's a much more sophisticated car now. It is still a high-quality sports car. My preference, because I'm 44 years old, would be to be in a Corvette. I like a roof over my head, you know, that I don't have to get out and put over my head.
And with the amenities of roll-up windows and whatever.
Yeah,
We're looking
sure.
at the interior, and you can see that's a little bit more like a street car.
Yeah.
With the computerized gauges, etc. And the, what do you call those, the digital...
Well, you have a combination of digital and analog gauges here. Digital basically meaning, well, what digital is, it comes out on the screen. Analog.
Now, bottom line, Warren, I know this is a very limited production car.
Yeah.
And there's going to be very few available, and I suppose that's how they handle the competitive question, but price. Everybody always wants to know price. This one?
Charlie, your problem is that you keep mixing practicality with fantasy. Now, okay, but since you want to be practical, okay?
Right. The
bottom line is this. This one is priced at about $50,000. This one carries a similar price tag. But keep in mind that you're talking about maybe 200 copies of the Viper in 1992. And also keep in mind that the manufacturer sells to the dealer. The dealer is an independent business person. And when you have a limited amount of anything, as an independent business person, you charge what the traffic will
So you
bear.
probably won't get it at list price. It'll cost you a good bit more.
No,
Warren?
this is not a charity case.
All right.
Yeah.
Warren, thanks very much.
Sure
Good to
thing.
have you here.
Okay.
Good rundown on two cars that I suppose everybody would like. It is now 17 minutes before the hour. We'll be back. Good Morning America continues.
The first Corvette sold in 1953 cost $3,498.
We're back at 8 o'clock on this Friday morning, the 5th day of June, 1992, my sister Emily's birthday. And ahead in this hour, campaign advertising. We'll see what kind of ad Ross Perot would run if he turned to Madison Avenue for advice. And ahead over the next 2 weeks, we'll do the same with George Bush and Bill Clinton. We'll also take a look at a very interesting new book about Jackie Gleason, whose sketches still make us laugh, no matter how often we see them. And welcome back to our second hour of today. I'm Katie Couric here with Margaret Larson while Bryant is off and Al Roker as well. Are you guys big Jackie Gleason fans?
I can tell he is.
Chef of the future.
I'm the chef of the future.
I used to love the Jackie Gleason show when I was a kid, particularly the June Taylor dancers.
That was my favorite.
I love those overhead
it?
shots
Right.
where they did all those weird things with their legs and they looked like a human kaleidoscope.
This must have been the precursor to water ballet or whatever that thing
Something
is.
like that, but I thought they were great. Keith Morrison is at the news desk. We'll get to him in just a few minutes. What else is on tap?
And then later in the hour, Katie, we're going to have more with Tom Brokaw, who will be here with a preview of his special program tonight on guns in this country, a Brokaw report called America the Violent.
But first, the hour's top news story, and as promised, here's Keith Morrison. Keith?
Thank you all. Good morning. President Bush faced the media at the White House last night, and many of the questions were about, you guessed it, Ross Perot. The president predicted that he will be re-elected after the voters find out more about Perot. He said reporters should ask, for example, about his potential challenger's opposition to the war against Iraq. Mr. Bush said the Constitution, by the way, needs a balanced budget amendment, and he defended his record on the environment. Perot's name will appear on the ballot in another state. Although he is still not officially a candidate, he He went to Las Vegas to thank the volunteers who helped him qualify in Nevada. But Linda Douglas reports that volunteers may be playing smaller roles in the Perot campaign now.
In Las Vegas, a cheering crowd turned in signatures to get Ross Perot on the Nevada ballot. He told them he's prepared to buy the election for the American people. But he said volunteers, not money, have made him a serious candidate.
I just want you to understand what you've done in the last 90 days. Now, can you imagine what you can do between now and November?
Ross Perot's grassroots movement is about to transform into a high-powered, heavily financed political campaign. But in Los Angeles, volunteers are still working around the clock trying to collect a record 1 million signatures to put Perot's name on the California ballot.
Some people here have made enormous sacrifices, working 7-day weeks, 12, 14 hours a day to get this thing off the ground.
Former LAPD narcotics officer Mike Rupert is one who has made personal sacrifices to work for Perot. He works full-time as campaign spokesman for no pay. The staffing of the campaigns may change soon, though. Perot's campaign has been taken over by two top political operatives, Republican Ed Rollins and Democrat Hamilton Jordan. Rupert says the volunteers were relieved to hear professionals would manage the campaign, but he conceded some grassroots workers are now worried about being pushed aside.
We do have some concern that maybe all the people who've done such hard work might be forgotten, but we don't think so.
Linda Douglas, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Although Perot portrays himself as a political outsider, he certainly had access to the center of power when Richard Nixon was president. In an exclusive interview today, Katie asked Nixon if Perot is truly an outsider.
Ross Perot is one who knows how to operate within the establishment. He has had government cooperation with many of his ventures. That, however, should help him in the event that he's elected president. He knows how the system works. But as far as the people are concerned, the American people, they see him as an outsider. They see him as one who is going to shake things up, and they feel that he gives the best hope for the kind of change they think is necessary.
What kind of president do you think he would be?
Well, that's too early to tell. What is important now is to watch what kind of people he has around him. If he gets competent people around him, if he listens to them, he can be an effective president. If, however, he has just a bunch of yes men and yes women around him, he would be a disastrous president.
The former president said his own loyalties remained with President Bush, but he described Perot as the strongest third-party candidate in this century, and he described this year's presidential contest as a two-man race, Bush and Perot. He told Katie that if Bill Clinton is to have a chance, he's going to have to make a strong speech at next month's Democratic National Convention in New York. Leftist rebels are being blamed for this morning's deadly truck bombing at a television station in Lima, Peru. At least 5 people were killed, including a reporter, and homes as far as 15 blocks from the station were damaged. The station had been outspoken in its opposition to the rebels and its support of hardline government policies. World leaders are placing their signatures on treaties at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, but Ed Rabel reports that changes demanded by the United States have weakened one of the most important agreements there.
Brazilian President Fernando Collor de Mello was the first to sign the Treaty on Global Climate Control. Other world leaders will too, even though the United States rendered it virtually meaningless. The United States, the world's biggest polluter, insisted that no caps be placed on emissions of carbon dioxide, the gas that contributes most to the greenhouse effect. Critics said the watered-down treaty is a tragic failed opportunity to reduce the threat of global warming. And the Bush administration's refusal to sign the Earth Summit centerpiece agreement to preserve endangered species continues to bring the U.S. under fire here. EPA Administrator William Riley, the chief U.S. delegate here, denied that the U.S. is rethinking its position.
Unfortunately, there is a lot of extraneous information that threatens to constrain our trade and intellectual property rights, put our patents at risk, set up a new regime for regulating biotechnology, all of which are not, we think, in the interest of genuine biological diversity protection, certainly not in the economic interest of the United States.
Riley said that even if he signed the agreement, Congress probably wouldn't ratify it because it is fundamentally flawed. Ed Rabel, NBC News, Rio de Janeiro.
A powerful storm system over North Carolina took a Delta Airlines jet on a wild Thursday afternoon ride. 4 people aboard the New York-bound Airbus suffered neck and back injuries. As the turbulence flung that Airbus around in the sky, it wasn't any fun at all. It's 8:07 now. Back to Katie and Margaret.
Ugh, I hate stories like that.
Oh, very
Keith.
scary.
Hate turbulence.
Yep.
I don't do turbulence.
I don't think many people do.
I know. You don't find many people. Oh, I hope it's a rough
we
ride.
hit some real bumps. I don't see a lot of people doing that.
Oh, well, what can I tell you? So what's the weather like?
Well,
Mr. Roker?
Well, some turbulence around, but all in all, not too bad. Let's take a look at the radar, show you what's going on out there, and you will see that we've got some wet weather moving into the northeast. Also, midsection of the country, we'll see some activity happening as well. And if you were planning to be in the water as far as your leisure time, New York City water temperatures, 60. Wilmington, North Carolina, 71. 82 off of Miami, and Galveston, oh, Galveston. Sorry, 79 degrees.
Glenn Campbell?
Yeah, I got scared by a picture of Glenn Campbell earlier today. And